25 minutes right now after 6 on CBC Radio 1 and CBC Television. If you head to New York City, go to a restaurant, there's a new symbol on the menus that you'll see there. It's a salt shaker in a black triangle. Its purpose is to warn you that a particular food item has more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium. As of yesterday, certain eateries in New York City are required to include these alerts. Will they change people's behavior? Mary Scourboutakos is a PhD candidate in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Toronto. She writes a blog about nutrition. Mary, good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
Is it a good idea to tell people through a little triangle and a salt shaker that this food they're about to eat is a salt bomb?
I definitely think it's a good idea. We know that people on average are consuming way more sodium than they need, and sodium is a major risk factor for high blood pressure, which is a major risk factor for heart disease and stroke. And most of the sodium people are consuming is in restaurants, so we're really going right to the source where people are getting their sodium and warning them about it.
What is likely to be labeled with this warning?
Well, it's interesting. In our research, where we've looked at sodium levels in Canadian chain restaurant foods, we see wide ranges of sodium in many different types of foods. So you can't always predict which menu item will have that symbol. But on average, we see things like stir-fries and poutine often coming up a little higher than other items.
And so, is it likely that I'm not going to order the stir-fry or the delicious poutine if I see that symbol in front of me?
Well, in research, we often see that giving people a disincentive or a warning like that can have some effect. However, of course, in New York, we'll have to see what happens when the public health agencies start evaluating this and actually measuring. But you have to keep in mind, it's not just the effect of the warning label on the consumer, but also the effect of the warning label on the restaurants themselves, because it may help them get more incentive to reformulate and lower sodium levels in their foods.
Is it possible to do that? People say, well, how could you do that without eliminating taste, for example, and eliminating flavor? Is it possible to dramatically reduce the amount of sodium in the foods that you've talked about without altering how they taste?
Well, that's a great question. The interesting thing is, because we see such a wide range of sodium levels, I think it is possible, because clearly people are eating some hamburgers with 500 milligrams, and people are eating other hamburgers with 2,500. So there is part of the market that is dominated by these foods that are lower in sodium, and also we know that the palate adjusts. And people, if they start receiving more low-sodium foods, will become more sensitive to the taste of salt.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's because we're used to having really high salty foods, so our tongue is less sensitive to the taste of salt. But research has shown that if you gradually lower sodium in the food supply, people don't even notice that those levels are getting lower, and their palate readjusts, and they become more sensitive to the taste of salt.
That's really interesting. I mean, there's this idea that you have like this higher level of tolerance if you keep eating more salt. You're saying that you can turn that around, that if it's actually reversible.
Exactly, and it's something that we're hoping to work on in future years.
In the meantime, is this something that you think we should explore here in this city, looking at having those kind of labels on menus?
I definitely think so. As a matter of fact, over the last 3 years, there have been bills proposed at Queen's Park that were called precisely for sodium warning labels, and unfortunately they didn't pass. But we do know that in May, Canada's first menu labeling policy was passed here in Ontario. So beginning in January 2017, we're going to have calorie information on restaurant menus. So we're only about 8 years behind where New York was when they first had their calorie labeling. So maybe in 8 years, we'll have sodium warning labels too.
I mean, the other side of this is that there are people who would say, honestly, I mean, I know what it is that I'm eating, and I'm eating in moderation. I'm not eating poutine every single day. Some people might, but I'm not eating poutine every single day. And if I eat in moderation, a little bit of sodium, excess sodium once in a while isn't going to crush me dead.
Sure, if you're only eating out once in a while, it's not a huge problem. But we know that that's not the case. Many people are eating out every single day, and that's where it becomes a problem. And the other issue is just that the sodium is hidden, and you can't see it. You can't predict which item is going to be highest in sodium. So this policy will help people. It will highlight which items really are the highest ones on the menu.
Mary, it's great to talk to you about this. Thank you.
Great speaking with you, too. Thanks, Matt.
Mary Scourboutakos is a PhD candidate in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the U of T. Also writes a blog about nutrition, talking about the warnings on menus in New York regarding sodium levels and whether they will actually change behavior, but also whether we should bring them here. The news is next.